Welcome to Tourism Unfiltered, where we investigate the impact of social media on modern-day tourism. This is our third episode, where we'll be focusing on the case study city of Barcelona, Spain, often referred to as the intercultural hub of the Catalonia region. There is no better way to start this episode than to talk about the many factors that drive tourists to the city of Barcelona. Considered one of the best preserved medieval cities, Barcelona is home to 9 UNESCO World Heritage Sites and has a unique blend of Gothic and modernist architecture, with the Sagrada Familia, Casa Mila, and the historic center of the Gothic Quarter being just a few of the major highlights of the city. In addition, visitors have the opportunity to experience the beach, the mountains, and an urban atmosphere all in one place. Barcelona is also known as the City of Chocolate, making it an ideal city for food lovers who can visit the Musée de la Chocolata chocolate museum and take chocolate sampling tours. The city is not just limited to Spanish food options, as Barcelona features a variety of international cuisine, especially with their wide selection of food markets and Michelin star restaurants. As you can probably imagine, these mentioned experiences in Barcelona can be found all over social media. The Sagrada Familia has become a popular photo location for tourists, especially as it nears the end of its construction in 2026. An article published on Sagrada Familia Tips and Tricks in Gastro Travelog even includes a chart of all the best photo angles in front of the church that varies depending on the time of day and the sun's positioning. Starting in 2026, the landmark had to start implementing ticketed entry during exclusive time slots with no flexibility for visitors who miss their assigned time slot, which is very similar to the Louvre's new reserved ticket rule mentioned in the previous episode. While this change is meant to ease the crowd volumes, it doesn't change the fact that visitors can still maximize their photo opportunities outside the church without purchasing any sort of ticket. In terms of cuisine, La Boquera, which is Barcelona's most popular food market, has seen 70% of its daily visitors being tourists. Since La Boquera has a lot of separate food vendors and stalls, a large portion of the social media posts about the market are guides that tell visitors what vendors are worth checking out and which ones are overrated and worth skipping. This has sparked a lot of competition between vendors that are essentially trying to gain traction among tourists. Catalan News, when interviewing one of La Boquera's cod vendors, was told that the packaging of fried cod cakes, despite being a traditional Catalonian product sold in many locations, was changed in the market to look more visually appealing to visitors. In order to have a vendor deemed worthy of making it into these social media posts highlighting the market, vendors have to place an effort in having their stalls appear aesthetically pleasing to appeal to tourists. Barcelona's reputation as a city full of diverse cultures has welcomed tourists of all different identities to feel comfortable and safe when traveling to their destination. There are even some offered experiences that cater to the history and culture of certain identity groups. These types of experiences that aim to widen the perspectives of tourists on Barcelonian history are considered to be forms of conscious tourism, which can be defined as an ethical approach to travel that connects tourists with local communities and cultures. One example of this is Afro Iberica Tours, a tour company based in multiple cities in Spain as well as Portugal, with a mission to immerse visitors in the lesser-known narratives of Black presence in the Iberian Peninsula. Some of Afro Iberica's offerings include educational tours about the colonial shadows of Spain and African culinary experiences. In addition, the company also holds partnerships with a variety of hotels and universities, and has its own Instagram with nearly 4,000 followers, featuring information about the offered experiences and video reviews from customers. I am thrilled to have Kwame Ondo, the founder of Afro Iberica Tours and the tour guide from Madrid, joining me on the podcast today.
How did you first get involved in the organization? How was your starting point with the tours? And what is your regular responsibilities as well?
Well, I am the founder and I'm the main guy, basically. And I started because obviously there was a need in the market. The idea for the tour really started because I began working as a tour guide in Barcelona after 17 years in the UK. And when I was in Barcelona, I realized that the Black travelers were enjoying the city, doing the tour things, the food, the gastronomy, all of that. But I could sense that they were not getting the full image of their trip. They were looking for something else. Having this knowledge from Black history and having the experience of being a tour guide, I could put the two and two together and then they lay out something comprehensible for people, some information people could connect to that information and get involved in the tools.
Yeah, so now that you've been able to found the group, how has that been now? Like, what are your current tasks in your role?
I've been pretty much organizing everything since the beginning. I had people helping me, specific points, with the website, with social media. But because it's a project that it is not, let's say, it was not giving me financial support enough.
Mm-hmm.
So it was obviously very difficult to pay people to stay for a long run. It's just basically keeping me afloat. But the idea is really to make it grow. Also, I want to take it to different parts of Spain
Mm-hmm.
and in Portugal.
When it comes to like people who go on the tours, do you find that you usually get in terms of the demographic a lot of people who are connected to those histories, or do you also get like scholars or people who are just interested in learning more?
It's really of the time of the year. For instance, January, February, March, it's a lot of schools, universities.
Mm-hmm.
Then from then on is different organizations like teachers and anthropologists. I work with NGOs. I work with schools, with universities, and solo travelers.
Do you know how they're able to find you or get connected? Do they usually do searches on the internet, or think they see the post on social media and then come to your page? Or do they
Yeah,
usually
I mean, the thing is that I am not a magician with social media. So they find me. People from the US, mostly Afro Americans. I'm looking for that kind of story. So they find me on social media, on Google, on Instagram. They also have my own website, and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on different platforms. So, to make myself, being seen.
Mhm. Is that something that you've noticed through your just process of being a tour guide and working in this business, where there's any tension between like, local communities and tourists that needs to be fixed or worked upon?
Well, the tourism industry is very strong in Spain.
Mhm.
But obviously, the locals, the people that live in the city, they are pretty stressed with because the prices go up with all of these things that has to do with the Airbnbs and stuff like that. So the locals, they have to move out of the city. They're kicked out. And I really understand. But it's an industry that brings a lot of job and also feeds families. It's a kind of a contradiction there going on.
And then, do you find that centering these tours around Black experiences and history promotes this version of tourism that's less commercialized and more people having more of that authentic experience? I know you kind of already touched on that, but do you think that tourists who just go to a place like Barcelona and only visit the major monuments and take photos and really just do the first thing that they see on the internet are like really missing out on this experience?
Definitely, people missed out on because most of these tools have to be made, let's say, likable for everybody in the sense that they mainly touch on a very adulterized version of history.
Yeah.
Okay, they never go into the deep of the foundation of how these cities were created and how these monuments and palaces and all of this wealth was created. So a lot of people are in need of this kind of a story, one that gone a little bit deeper in how the construction of these cities came to be in Europe. So that is what I try to bring. I have to do. I try to do a bit more of conscious tourism. Okay, because a lot of people are kind of needing that. Not only tourists or black tourists, but also white people, but also institutions, but also NGOs, and that is something that I just put on the table.
I know you mentioned conscious tourism as something that you think is very important. Do you see that it's on the rise, or do you think that it needs to still be advocated for a lot more?
Needs to be advocated a lot more. I mean, it's good to do fun stuff and entertaining stuff, but we also have to look for more spiritual growth and historical growth. So I think for me it's very important because most people in Spain really focus on holidays, and gastronomy and monuments and museums, which is fine, part of the whole, spectrum in the city. But obviously, people would like to find out more about I don't know, for instance, uh, the Spanish Civil War, which is not talked about much, slavery, colonization, the rights of women, the role of people from the LGBT communities. Yeah, I think people are really getting and drawing more attention to these kind of topics, but not everyone.
I want to focus on Kwame's point that conscious tourism needs to be continuously advocated for in order to continue as an industry. This made me think of Rainbow Barcelona, a subdivision of Rainbow Gay Tours. This organization offered LGBTQ+ friendly tours that touch on Barcelona's queer history, especially around the Gay Sample entertainment district, which is full of discotheques and a lively drag scene. One interview with Rainbow Barcelona's founder, Eloy, mentions how he started the company since he felt other tour companies in the area lacked an in-depth knowledge on LGBTQ+ history, which he found to be a missed opportunity since Barcelona has an open-minded community that has created a safe environment for LGBTQ+ travelers. Despite Eloy's efforts and the tour company maintaining a 5-star rating on TripAdvisor with over 280 reviews, Rainbow Barcelona suddenly suspended all operations around 2025. While there is no available public statement on this closure besides an update from the travel site Globetrotter Guys, my interview with Kwame made it clear these conscious tourism businesses can't be sustained without enough financial support coming in. He also mentioned that despite not being a magician with social media, promoting a niche and socially conscious tour company on these platforms is crucial to attracting new tourists. Rainbow Barcelona did not use social media advertising, so the organization likely missed out on reaching a demographic of tourists interested in the LGBTQ+ friendliness of Barcelona that use social media as a tool to plan their trip. If a company like Rainbow Barcelona only has customers who actively seek it out as opposed to being attracted through social media advertising, the business could eventually slow down and be put in jeopardy. In a strange way, the advertising of socially conscious endeavors needs to be prioritized over the operations themselves to ensure that business stays continuous, especially during a time when tourists tend to not use internet deep dives to plan their trips as much. One particular organization centered around a certain niche that has grabbed the attention of tourists in recent years through an active online presence is Barcelona's Afro Brunches. Afro Brunch is a club-style event that takes place in the mornings where a ticket for only €20 includes a plate of African food, a complimentary drink, and live Afrobeats music. While these events might not focus on historical or educational components as much as Afro-Iberica and Rainbow Barcelona, Afro Brunch has struck a balance of providing a new cultural perspective on Spain while also gaining traction on social media for the unique outdoor day club atmosphere with food integrated into the experience. When it comes to the most pressing effects of over-tourism in Barcelona, the city is currently experiencing a housing crisis due to housing options being bought out and converted into Airbnbs for tourists that are rented out at extremely high prices. In 2025, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs forcibly fined the company €64 million for allowing unlicensed tourist accommodations to be listed on the site, and over 65,000 of these listings were forcibly removed. Tensions between local communities and tourists in Barcelona have been quite intense for over the past decade, as anti-tourist groups in the city started to become active around 2010. One of these groups is the Assemblée de Barris pel Decreixement Touristique, also known as ABDT for short, or the Neighborhood Assembly for Tourism Degrowth. ABDT is an organization with membership spread across Southern Europe that aim to challenge the traditional growth-driven tourism model as it specifically relates to local and regional consequences of tourism. They also are the organizers of the famous anti-tourist protest in Barcelona in 2025, where tourists were sprayed with water guns as the protesters lit firecrackers and led chants telling them to go home. Daniel Pardo, one of the organizers from ABDT, was interviewed on the End of Tourism podcast, where he spoke about his views on over-tourism in Barcelona.
When I was looking at the work of ABDT online, I noticed that the organization was previously called the Assembly of Neighborhoods for Sustainable Tourism. And it has since become the Assembly of Neighborhoods for Tourism Degrowth.
Yeah.
Would you care to offer our listeners, Daniel, the differences between degrowth tourism and sustainable tourism, and to tell us why you think that change in name was important for the organization?
Yeah, that's quite easy. I mean, we never believed about the possibility of sustainable tourism in a short term in Barcelona. I mean, this first name was quite fake. Since the beginning, very much represented by the idea of tourism degrowth, but nobody talked about that in the city at the time, and we didn't want to be just rejected because of radicals. And so it was kind of a balance between what we felt we were and what we wanted to reflect outside. And at a certain point, we just decided that the label of tourism industry, which was really old and old-fashioned since the beginning somehow. And on the other hand, we have been working with this concept of tourism degrowth for years, 3 years, and we thought we were ready to change.
I wonder, how can movements like ABTD work to degrow tourism while not feeding the fire of racism or xenophobia?
Mm-hmm. We ourselves have suffered often attacks of being pointed like tourismophobics. And in fact, our conclusion is that, in fact, tourismophobia does not exist. It's just a propaganda campaign from the tourism sector in order to deviate the attention. No? And I can understand the people who turn against tourists, because I think it's a natural reaction. But I think this has been a major role as ABDT through the years, is to explain to the people they should point their anger and their strength against the industry and not against tourists. This is more difficult because it's much easier to talk bad about tourists or even to insult them, but this will never produce a change. And so the important thing is to turn against the true guilty of the situation, the true responsible. It's hard to say that, but I mean, the right to flying does not exist. The right to tourism does not exist. Mm-hmm. This is true. The right to tourism does not exist. I mean, tourism is not sustainable because you can't extend the model of tourism everybody thinks about to all the population. It's impossible. Mm. You are living and you are traveling and you are touring very, very longer than our possibilities. I mean, and our possibilities are the ones of our planet. I mean, we've been talking mainly about the effects of touristification in the city, but talking about the planet, tourism is one of the main producers of CO2 emissions. So it's not what should we do, and the planet is telling us what to do, and we are not listening at all.
Well, may this be an opportunity for our listeners to know that there's people in the world who are working and honoring their cities and their towns and their cultures in good ways, and that they're not alone. And, whether you're people who work in the tourism industry, whether you're tourists or whether you're activists, this is an example of what we can learn from.
Some of Daniel's beliefs in tourism degrowth and the idea that popular travel destinations should move away from a tourism economy in order to protect local communities can be considered quite controversial. However, I think Daniel's most important remark is that local communities should direct their frustrations towards the tourism industry as a whole instead of the tourists themselves. If protesters are to keep this sentiment in mind, it will likely ease tensions between tourists and organizers against over-tourism. That being said, these ideals were certainly not reflected in the famous 2025 ABDT protest when organizers chose to yell at tourists and spray them with water guns. Considering the protest occurred 4 years after Daniel's interview, there is a chance the intensity of post-pandemic over-tourism might have led the ABDT to change their approach. Or it might just be that other organizers in the group hold views that differ. This contradiction within the ABDT's approach serves as a reminder that there is still a lot of uncertainty and disagreement about how anti-over-tourism efforts should be addressed. The local government of Barcelona has actually been quite responsive to concerns about over-tourism through creating several new policies. The first is a temporary ban on short-term rentals to tourists that will be in place until 2028. There is also a tourist tax currently being piloted as a way to combat the recent housing crisis, and this tax is specifically included when visitors pay to stay overnight in Barcelona. As of 2026, the amount of this tax is tiered based on where the visitor is staying, taking into account factors such as star rating, whether they are at a luxury hotel, and the proximity to gambling centers that are frequently visited by tourists. There has also been a proposed plan to double this tourist tax within the next year, which could go up to as high as $16. But this change has yet to go through an approval process. Action from the local government is important to combat over-tourism, as it doesn't place the responsibility on businesses and Barcelona residents themselves to deal with the daily inconveniences that tourism has caused. Thank you so much for joining us today on Tourism Unfiltered. Stay tuned for the next episode as we investigate social media's impact on the iconic city of canals and gondolas, Venice, Italy. Until next time, goodbye!